Mets top prospect Carson Benge is the center fielder of the future, but he also might need to be the center fielder of the present.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast in the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. If there is one thing that the New York Mets have taught us over the last couple of years, it's very hard to address the center field position. Brandon Nimmo was a great center fielder for the New York Mets in 2022. That is why he got an 8-year deal. But after the 2023 season, when David Stearns came to town, they decided to move Nimmo into a corner. And that is probably the best thing for Brandon Nimmo and his health. And ultimately, his defense in center field probably would not be great if they try to stick him back in center field now. But in his absence in center, the Mets have tried Harrison Bader. They tried Tyrone Taylor. They tried Jose Siri. They then tried Cedric Mullin for the deadline. And of course, Jeff McNeil was parading out in center field this past season. And while the defensive metrics said he actually did a pretty good job, ultimately his range in center field was not that of a true center fielder. You can't actually go into next season and say, all right, we're going to go with Jeff McNeil and Tyrone Taylor again. So center field is position the Mets should be addressing this offseason. But the question I ask you is how? Because this, again, is the hardest position to address in Major League Baseball. And you have your future center fielder waiting in the wings who finished last season in AAA, and that's Carson Benge. Carson Benge is probably going to go into this season as a top 20 prospect in all of baseball. At justbaseball.com, where I write, we had him at 19 in our last update, which came after the trade deadline. There's every chance that he can move up a couple of slots here as we do our preseason rankings going into the 2026 season. So he could be top 15. We'll talk about Carson Benge more in the final segment, but if you want a stopgap for Benge because he's only played 24 games in AAA and he didn't put up good numbers, granted, I think a large reason for that is because he got drilled in the hand and missed some time, and then they struggled to get acclimated once he got back from that injury. But if you think he needs more seasoning and you need a stopgap, where are you going to find that stopgap? Internally, you got Tyrone Taylor, but he had a brutal season offensively. This is a guy that prior to coming to the Mets, I remember I was talking about the acquisition. I said, at least this guy's going to give you some pop. Had at least 10 home runs in his 3 previous seasons with the Brewers before coming to the Mets. A slugging percentage over 440 each year. As a Met, his slug is well below 400. This past season, he had a slash line of a 223 average, a 279 on base, and a 319 slug, hit 2 home runs. Had a measly 598 OPS. It was his worst OPS of his career. First time he's ever had an OPS below 700, and his WRC plus was 70. That's 30% worse than your league average hitter. He's your best center fielder right now. And he's coming off an awful offensive season. But how many good offensive center fielders are there in Major League Baseball? If you look at WRC plus, which measures hitters on a league average of 100, if you just go through the center fielders who got 200 plate appearances in the 2025 season, there were 19 center fielders that were above average offensively. Just 19. For context, there was 32 left fielders and 30 right fielders. And also, if you go further into the weeds and start looking at how many left fielders or right fielders were in the 90s for their WRC plus, so slightly below league average, then it's an even longer list and a starker contrast to center field, where when you drop off, there's not even that many in the 90s, and it goes right down to the 80s, and you get some of the worst hitters in Major League Baseball that play center field. It is a defensive first position. But if you go through the names of guys who had above average seasons offensively in center field, almost none of them are available. Byron Buxton already said at the All-Star break, I have a no trade clause and I intend to use it. I will be a Minnesota Twin. So he's not going anywhere. You can mock trades for him all you want. Not happening. Jacob Marcy was a rookie for the Marlins last year. They're not trading him. Julio Rodriguez, not going anywhere. Dalton Varsho, likely not going anywhere. Wyatt Langford, he's not going anywhere. Jackson Merrill, Andy Pajes, Jackson Churio, Pete Crow Armstrong, Jung-Hoo Lee, Brandon Marsh, all of those guys are going to stay put with their teams. That takes that list of 19, drops it down to 8. Trent Grisham and Harrison Bader are on that list, and they're both free agents, but they're coming off career years. And they're both going to be looking for multi-year deals. Do you want to pay those guys off of the best seasons they've ever had for multiple years when you have Carson Benge waiting in the wings? Probably not. Knocks the list down to 6. Joe Adell is on that list, but he's a terrible defensive center fielder. So is Mickey Moniak. And Moniak, I don't know how much I'm going to buy a successful season at Coors Field. So that drops the list down to 4. And then that list that includes guys who are theoretically available through trade, who had a WRC plus above 100. It's 4 guys who all come with 3 years of team control or more where their teams are unlikely to move them. And that's TJ Friedel, Jake Myers, Evan Carter, and Wenzel Perez. Is there a world where you can maybe pull off a trade for Evan Carter because the Rangers can put Wyatt Langford in center field? Maybe, sure. But Evan Carter had a decent season, but the year before that, he was terrible. The point is, there are not a lot of good options in Major League Baseball in center field. You can go the reclamation project route, which the Mets tried to last offseason with Jose Siri. You can make a trade for an Alek Thomas or a Parker Meadows or a Brenton Doyle. But these are players that their current teams might not be looking to move. In particular, I don't think the Rockies are going to move Brenton Doyle because I think they really like him as a player. Parker Meadows, I think the same thing in Detroit. Yeah, maybe you can get Alek Thomas, but what does that really do for you? To get a guy that has pretty much never been an above average hitter in Major League Baseball. And this past year, defensively, he wasn't even as good as he's been in years past. There really is a few options that could fill that void of being a stopgap. One who would only be a stopgap in center field until Benge is ready, and that is signing one of the top free agents this offseason in Cody Bellinger, poaching him from the Yankees. The other is Luis Robert, who you tried to trade for at the deadline and came up short. So what we're going to talk about next is whether either of those options make sense for the New York Mets. And then we're going to close the show going through the internal options, namely Carson Benge. And if the Mets should really just roll the dice on their top prospect being able to start this season on the big league roster. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's their 401ks, properties, investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts on Monarch, and you start to see the spending that you're doing each month that maybe you want to cut back on. Like I started to say, wow, we need to cut back on this takeout because it is adding up. Or maybe you see some of those subscriptions that you have that you're not using, but you're paying for each month. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser. You're going to get half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONMLB. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, Being right means cashing in. With football back as well as basketball now, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, it's easy. Honestly, it's my favorite way to follow along with the sports slate because you can go for Thursday night football and make some picks there, but also build your lineup with some players in the NBA. You can go across sports to build out the ideal lineup for that given day. And the best part, even if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play, so you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're getting closer and closer. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And we know at the trade deadline, the New York Mets did pursue a trade for Luis Robert, but they could not land on a deal. At the time, it was reported at one point that the White Sox wanted Mark Vientos, and they trade 4 years of Mark Vientos for Luis Robert, who was not performing well and on an expensive contract. Ultimately, whether that was the entirety of the deal or there was more that went into it, the Mets chose to go for Cedric Mullins, a center fielder they were able to acquire for 3 reliever prospects rather than whatever that price was to get Robert. Now they can do this all over again, but they might have more time without the pressure of a deadline to get a deal done. Robert, again, did not have a good season. He hit 223, 297 on base, 364 slug, 14 home runs. His WRC plus was in the 80s for the second straight year. He did steal 33 bases. He still plays strong defense in center field. He's going into his age 28 season. There are things to like about Luis Robert. And if you're talking about the ultimate stopgap, this is it. $20 million club option, $2 million buyout on that option. And at this point, the White Sox are going to pick up the option and go through this all over again, whether that means finding a trade partner in the offseason, whether that means going into the year with Robert once again and hoping he plays well enough that you can flip him at the deadline. They are going to continue this thing once more. If the Mets picked him up and he was bad this year, you pay a $2 million buyout on another $20 million option for next year, and you're good to go. Okay, you get him off your books. You can wash your hands clean with them if Carson Benge proves that he is the starting center fielder for the New York Mets. And also, the one thing Luis Robert does well is he mashes left-handed pitching. So you could be in a situation where if Benge proves to be ready, you can platoon Robert and Benge in center field, and it actually might be a pretty nice compliment. But what I can't get over is the $20 million price tag. I think I'd rather call up Harrison Bader and say, look, we're not giving you multiple years, but we'll give you $16 million to be our starting center fielder in 2026 and go that route over Luis Robert. And call me crazy, but the thing about it is it's not just paying $20 million. It's paying $20 million and then meeting an unreasonable ask from Chris Getz on a prospect return. Chris Getz thinks that he has an asset and he doesn't. It's a negative asset. Now, do I think that Luis Robert on a different team in a different environment could regain some of that superstar potential that we saw, or the superstar promise that we saw in 2023 when he was awesome? Yeah, I think there is a good chance of that. Or was it maybe, I guess it was 2022 that he was great, right? When was Luis Robert good? Maybe it was 23, 2024 and 2025 is when he was bad. Yeah, 2023, he was an all-star. And he hit 38 home runs, stole 20 bases, had an 857 OPS. Last 2 years, his OPS has been right around 660, which is pretty brutal. We'll probably do a full show on Robert at some point because I got a lot of meat on this bone that I could chew on. And I also have my friend Elijah Evans, who works with me over at Just Baseball, who is a White Sox fan and really knows their farm system well, knows where they're at. And I think it'll be fun to go back and forth with him because me and him have argued off mic about Luis Robert a ton. So I think that could be a fun show to do at some point this offseason. I'm just not sold on Chris Getz being reasonable enough to make a trade that makes sense. Now, if you're telling me that you could trade Mark Vientos for Luis Robert right now, would I do it? I don't know. I have to think long and hard. It's still 4 years of Vientos for an expensive year of Luis Robert. I think I might just prefer having Mark Vientos be my DH, honestly, and betting on a bounce back rather than betting on the bounce back from Robert, especially when I know that I got Carson Benge potentially in the holster. So that's where I'm at with Robert. Now, the other option is Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger is an ideal fit for the New York Mets roster. He could be your starting center fielder in 2026, and then he can move over to right field after that for this contract, and you can get Juan Soto out of right field, whether that means he's a extraordinarily expensive DH or you teach him how to play first base. That is something the Mets could consider, and I think long-term probably makes their team fit a lot better than even signing Pete Alonso in some respects. But Pete Alonso is a better hitter than Cody Bellinger. Pete Alonso is a Met. Cody Bellinger likely returns to the Yankees. I think the Yankees are going to give him the long-term deal that he seeks. You can make a case that he was their second best player this year. So I don't know how realistic it is for the Mets to get Bellinger unless they aren't paying Alonso and they are overpaying Bellinger. And then you're locked into maybe 5 years of Cody Bellinger, maybe 6 years of Cody Bellinger. And Bellinger had a bad 2024. There's some inconsistencies to his game. I like Cody Bellinger. I love him on a 1-year deal. That is not going to happen. So if it's not Bellinger and it's not Robert, who else can you get? The one other name I actually want to toss out there is Javi Baez, because Javi Baez was actually great in center field this past season. He makes a ton of money, so you could pick him up just by taking on a good amount of that contract. And I actually think there is a Javi Baez for Jeff McNeil trade that's a little bit interesting for both teams. For the Tigers, you can get out of the Jeff McNeil contract after the 2026 season. It's making $15.75 million. So you would shave about $8 million in change in payroll, 8.25. Get a guy in Jeff McNeil that could be your starting second baseman. And Jeff McNeil was a better player by WAR than Javi Baez was this past season. Baez was an all-star, but after the all-star break, he hit 223, had a 46 WRC plus. That means he was 54% worse than your league average hitter. He goes into these valleys where he is just awful. All 4 years in Detroit, he has been a below average hitter, and a lot of them he's been a well below average hitter. But Javi Baez was amazing in a Mets uniform in 2021. He could play a good center field. He can play a great second base. And he could be your backup shortstop. There is a world where it makes sense, especially if Javi Baez is part of a Tarek Skubal trade. Maybe there's something there. But at the same time, do you really want to be on the hook for $24 million of Javi Baez in 2027? When, again, you can get out of the Jeff McNeil contract at that point. I don't think you want to have Javi Baez on your book. So as we go through all of these options, there's no clear-cut good option except for the internal option. That could be a great candidate to be your starting center fielder, not only in 2026, but for the next decade potentially. We're going to close the show on Carson Benge here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football even more exciting. Get a little bit of something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rugiet Go Long. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill, it's a total game changer for your confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. You connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rugiet.com. That's Rugiet.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet.com, Rugiet.com. Promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And during the season, you'll get the line graphic sent to your phone every day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Carson Benge is 22 years old. He'll turn 23 in January. He has played 56 games above high A. And I really do think he is their best option to start on opening day in center field. Now, I'm not saying, hey, give the kid the job right away. What I'm saying is give him an opportunity to win that job in spring training, and who knows, he might surprise you. Carson Benge, in 32 games in Double-A, hit .317 with a .407 on base and a .571 slug, hit 8 homers, had 6 doubles and a triple. Again, all of that is in 32 games. So that is 15 extra base hits in 32 games. He walked 12.4% of the time. He only struck out 15.9% of the time. He has great play discipline, really good knowledge of the strike zone, really good bat to ball skills. The ability to, maybe hit 20 home runs is probably the floor is 15, 20 homers. And I think there's still a ceiling of getting beyond that to 25 homer power, if not even 30 homer power, if everything sort of falls in line for Carson Benge. And I'm not saying, expect him to hit 30 bombs in 2026. But I think that he can be the Mets' best option to give you an above average at bat in center field from day one. I really think he is that talented of a hitter. And yes, the numbers in AAA were nowhere near as good as the numbers in AA, but he got drilled in the hand a week into his tenure in Syracuse, came back, struggled when he came off the IL, but came on strong final week of the season or week and change, last 7 games. He's hit safely in 5 of those 7 games, including one game where he went 4 for 4. I know it's only 24 games played in AAA, but you look at someone like Jackson Merrill, he didn't even play in AAA before he made his debut on opening day for the Padres in 2024, and he would have been the Rookie of the Year if not for Paul Skeens being a rookie at the same time. It was unbelievable that season. Cam Smith just did it for the Astros. Granted, not as good of an example because Cam Smith didn't have the best of seasons in Houston, but he only played a handful of games in the Cubs organization before he gets traded to the Astros, and he wins a job out of camp. There's other examples, too, of guys who just make that jump. Julio Rodriguez, I don't believe he played in AAA. So it's not outside the realm of possibilities that Carson Benge is your best option come opening day. And when I look at the other options externally, nothing really intrigues me. If you can get Luis Robert for the right price, I'm in on that. Because like I said, he could be a platoon partner for Carson Benge if he doesn't hit. If he does hit, if Carson Benge has to be buried in AAA for a little bit, that's cool because that means your big league roster is performing. And if Benge forces the issue, then that could mean Juan Soto is sliding to DH and Carson Benge is your starting right fielder because Luis Robert's your center fielder. Carson Benge is not going to be an elite defensive center fielder from day one, but he makes really good reads in the outfield. He's athletic enough to play center. He's probably going to be, if you end up having him in right, a well above average right fielder. And that's where he played more in college, but he played a lot of games in center field in the minor leagues this past season. I think he's going to hold his own there and be just fine. And again, this is their best option internally to have an above average bat in center field. And it's not their only option, which is why I fall into the camp of maybe you just don't get a center fielder. And who knows what's on the table for the Mets. I think if you can improve second base in a meaningful way, that would leave less pressure in center field. So if you were able to swing a trade for Ketel Marte, let's say you traded Jett Williams in a deal and you got Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte is your second baseman for the foreseeable future then, and that is an unbelievable double play combination between Ketel Marte and Francisco Lindor. And if you have Marte at the top of that lineup with Lindor, Soto, and Pete Alonso, now you're cooking with gas. Now, who knows if Ketel Marte is actually going to be traded? It's going to take a haul to get him. So I'm not saying that's a definite realistic possibility, but I'd rather give up prospects to get a bat like that than to hope that Luis Robert's going to have some complete turnaround and a change of scenery and give up prospects for a guy that has been bad for 2 years because their GM is unreasonable. So that's, again, where I get into this. What do you do? If it's not Luis Robert, then who else can you get that makes sense? You're not picking up Cedric Mullins again. That's not happening. Trent Grisham and Harrison Bader, like I mentioned, they're probably going to want 2-3 year deals. Don't think I would do that when I have Benge waiting in the wings. I would just trust that one of your guys is going to step up and able to be the center fielder for this upcoming season, whether that's Carson Benge or Jett Williams. Jett Williams can play center field. Is he going to be an incredible natural in center field? Not necessarily. He's going to get by on speed and athleticism. He's 5'6". So it's a small guy running down fly balls in center field, covering a lot of ground, but he has the speed to do it. You have Luis Acuna, also a short center fielder, but he has played center in the minor leagues and he can get by. I don't think Acuna is going to give you the bat that you want in center field, but he gives you another option on opening day. If Carson Benge needs a month in AAA, you got Tyrone Taylor and Luis Acuna. And if you want to, you always could have Brandon Nimmo play some center field. I don't think they'd want to do that in March and April. But again, I'm just kind of laying out all the options at the Mets' disposal. You also have Nick Morabito. Now, Nick Morabito is, in my eyes, further away from being a big league hitter than Carson Benge or Jett Williams. So I don't really know exactly how you'd factor into the mix, but he is Rule 5 draft eligible. So if the Mets don't trade him and he doesn't get selected in the Rule 5, that's probably because they add him to the 40-man roster. I think if he's not on the 40, there's a good chance he does get selected because he could be a team's fourth outfielder, and they can just get a prospect that has some promise to probably fill a fourth outfielder role long term. That's ultimately where I probably see Nick Morabito for the Mets as being a fourth outfielder, but he's another option. And so if you go into camp with an open competition, Tyrone Taylor is the incumbent, but you got Nick Morabito in big league camp. You got Jett Williams and Carson Benge in big league camp. I think it gives you a lot of options to ultimately figure out center field, knowing that if Benge isn't ready for opening day, he should be ready by June at the latest. I just would really count on Carson Benge being the answer for the New York Mets. And if not, you're in the same boat that you were in last season, and Tyrone Taylor is the guy. Maybe Tyrone Taylor with some different hitting coaches, maybe he can have a better season. He is still an elite defensive center fielder. And ultimately, if you have enough hitters in the other spots in your lineup, that's not the worst thing in the world to just lean defense in that spot. I think I'd probably hang on to Jeff McNeil. Maybe you trade a Vientos or a Mauricio. But if you have Jeff McNeil, you have a good floor at second base. You also have a guy that can play right field or left field and move Juan Soto or Brandon Nimmo to DH on occasion. And with that said, if McNeil ends up being your second baseman because Jett Williams is your center fielder, awesome. If Carson Benge can be your center fielder, well, now Jeff McNeil is your second baseman. I would give those guys, Jett Williams and Carson Benge, every opportunity for one of them to break camp. Whoever's more impressive might get a job. And I'm willing to bet on that, especially when you still have Luis Angel Acuna, who has to be rostered and can factor into those two positions where he can be an elite defensive second baseman. And in center field, I think he can get by just fine. Center field is a very hard position to address. And I don't like a lot of the options that are on the market. Now, like I said, I will do a full show on Luis Robert at some point this offseason. Hopefully with my boy Elijah Evans coming on to talk through it all from a White Sox perspective. That's also going to come after the White Sox pick up that option, because the White Sox decide, you know what, we're just done with the Luis Robert business, and they exercise the buyout on the contract and he becomes a free agent. Then I'm all in, because then it's a 1-year prove-it deal with no prospects going the other way. Even if that bidding war gets to $20 million, if I don't have to give up any prospects for Luis Robert, okay, cool. Then it's like Cody Bellinger with the Cubs a couple of years ago, before this contract that he signed, when he signed the 1-year prove-it deal after getting non-tendered by the Dodgers because he was going to make too much in arbitration. That's where I'm at the center field position for the upcoming season. I really think it should be Carson Benge's job for a majority of the season. And I think if you start him on opening day, you have him eligible for the PPI, that's the prospect promotion incentive, if he can win Rookie of the Year. But also, I think he's the type of hitter that can learn on the job in the big leagues and figure it out. And when you have other options like Tyrone Taylor, who would probably platoon with Carson Benge, if we're being honest, that's just how the Mets like to roll at times. And it's annoying because Tyrone Taylor hasn't hit lefties in his 2 years with the Mets, but they'll probably still go back to that. And that's fine if you want to shield him from some lefties. Personally, I would just play the kid every single day. And I would trust that over the course of the season, he would start to be a very good player for you. But going into camp with nothing but internal options in center field, that would be a bold strategy. So I'm sure David Stearns will probably acquire somebody. It's probably somebody I'm not even thinking of. But if it's another Jose Siri Asquith, wow, that's a weird. I was trying to, I guess I almost combined esque and addition there. Asquedition. If it's another Jose Siri type, I think you're still basically saying that you're expecting Benge and or Jett Williams to be the answer out in center field. And I don't think that that is a wrong assumption to make or a wrong bet to make on your guys, because I think that's the future of this position for the Mets, is one of those two guys filling that void, and it's probably Carson Benge. So we'll see what they decide to do. That's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Tomorrow's show, I'm going to go through the starting pitching market when it comes to free agency and tell you which of the free agent starters I like the most. So make sure you tune into that show. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you tune into Locked On Mets as your first watch or first listen every day, make sure that for your second watch, you check out Locked On MLB Game Night throughout the World Series. They're going to still have shows breaking down whatever is going on in this series. So make sure you check out Locked On MLB Game Night on YouTube, on the Locked On MLB channel, or the Locked On MLB podcast feed.